Hi, my name is Alex Jordan. I'm with McGrath Real Estate. I started my career in 1999, so this is my 24th year in the industry, and the area that we focus on is the inner western suburbs of Brisbane. So my real estate career wasn't inspired from high school. I didn't really have any intentions to become an agent. I was a musician, struggling musician, and I was looking for a day job, and I got into the car sales industry, which didn't work out as planned. I was semi-successful, but not quite the right role for me. And at the time I was selling cars, I noticed an ad in the Courier Mail, back in the days in the classified section, for a position as an agent in Toowong. Now I lived on the south side of Brisbane, so I had no idea where Toowong was. I ended up getting an interview after several attempts to try and get in the door, and that's how I started back in 1999. So I've been in this industry for 24 years now, and in my 24 years I've sold just over 2,200 properties. At the moment we average approximately 150 sales per annum, and the average sale price for us is circa $2 million. So my first year in real estate was an interesting one. I wasn't given a sales role. I wanted one, but I wasn't qualified for that. So I was given a role to be an office assistant, which meant I was putting up rental signs, taking photos of properties, dropping keys, dropping contracts, basically doing whatever I was told by the agents and the property managers and the principal of that office. And for the first 6 months, that was predominantly my role. And after that time frame, I was given the opportunity to get into sales. And I didn't own a car, so for me to get to work, I lived in Holland Park in Housing Commission. I'd have to walk to the bus stop from my house to Cavendish Road bus stop, catch a bus from Cav Road to Coorparoo train station, get off the bus, catch a train from Coorparoo to Central Station, and then swap trains from Central Station, go to Toowong Station, and then walk from Toowong to get to work. So it was a 2-hour journey at times, and I was very motivated, I was very hungry. I did exceptionally well in my first year, not with listing properties, but by servicing buyers and introducing buyers to other agents' listings. And in my first year, I had over 50 sales, but a lot of those sales were part sales where I wasn't the listing agent, I was just a selling agent. However, that really helped me because those buyers ended up becoming property owners. I built relationships with them, I nurtured those relationships, and they eventually became sellers. So whilst the initial start wasn't very successful with listings, over the next few years, it came back to me in multiples. My least favorite part of being an agent, I would say at this point in my life with 2 children, it's probably work-life balance that I'm trying to come to terms with. You know, after 24 years, you would think I figured it out, but I haven't, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Having said that though, I think this industry requires a bit of sacrifice. It's not a 4 or 5 day a week job, it is a 6 day a week job. And when I first started, I had these intentions that I would do 6 days for the first few years, and then eventually I'd wind it back to 5 days and have a normal sort of 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 role, which isn't the case. I think this industry can reward you handsomely, and I'm speaking not just financially, but in terms of just general success that you can achieve in this industry without any education, without any pedigree. You can come into it as a nobody, like I am, and get somewhere. And for me, that opportunity requires a bit of sacrifice. You've got to be willing to commit to that, but the rewards are well worth it. And those that are willing to commit and are persistent and don't give up, because it's very easy to give up in this industry. It's an up and down roller coaster ride. But if you stay persistent and you stay consistent and you follow a proven formula, then I think the reward will come to you in time. There's a lot of aspects that I enjoy about this industry. I love property, I love architecture. I enjoy dealing with people and connecting with them and building relationships. Those are my favorite parts, but if I had to pick one element of the industry that I love the most, it's the negotiation. So if I had to just negotiate all day and try and put deals together, particularly the challenging ones, they're the ones that I most enjoy, I would say that is my favorite part. In terms of superpowers, I hold none. I don't have any superpowers. I've had a lot of failure in my life in this industry. For the first 10 years, it was a struggle for me. So I think there's a lot of lessons that have come to me from those failures, and that's helped me have a better process, a better formula. But if I had to choose one item that I think we do well at, it would have to be negotiation. So the properties that we specialize in selling are predominantly houses and some higher end apartments. These are typically being sold by downsizers. So a lot of our sellers are in the baby boomer, empty nester demographic. We're selling those homes to younger families, and you're seeing a pattern of that pretty much in most of our transactions. Our average sale price is just around $2 million. And we do apartments as well. That's something we're branching out to. But most of what we sell in the apartment market is at the higher end of that market. And in terms of the real estate residential market for houses, we're probably playing towards the mid to high end. We don't want to focus too high because it's quite niche and it's a smaller volume sort of transactions that occur in that 5 million plus bracket. I think the sweet spot is somewhere between 1 and 3, and we focus in that range. I like to keep a close eye on the markets, and when I say markets, I'm referring to not just real estate markets, but also financial markets, so equities, stock markets. I read a lot, but it's more out of interest than it is to educate myself. The byproduct is I'm learning, but it's not something that it's hard for me to do or boring. I actually enjoy learning about it. So, what I'm noticing in today's market is that we've been in a very low volume market in terms of supply for the past almost 2 years. Of late, in the past few months, we've seen an increase in supply and an increase in days on market. So properties are taking a little bit longer to sell, and as they take longer to sell, you'll probably experience that in the next 6 months, there will be some supply build. I'm not going to call it a balloon, that might be an exaggeration, but we're going into a different phase of our market. We're not in the fear of missing out trend where the buyers were jumping over each other to get a deal. The fear of missing out, I think, will eventually shift to the seller where they are worried they're going to miss out on a decent price. Because as the market softens and we start to see some correction in values, I think sellers will want to get out to try and bank as much as they can. So I expect to see listing volumes increase, transactions a little bit more difficult to put together, days on market will likely expand, and the agents that are highly skilled will shine in this environment. And those that were riding the market and just being transactional, I think will find it more challenging in the months ahead. One of, I guess, my favorite success stories is a correlation for the pandemic. It's not one single story, but there's a number of properties and owners that reached out to me at the beginning of the pandemic. This was in early 2020. And they're all concerned about the market crashing. There was a lot of chatter around price correction. Some of the banks and economists were predicting a 30% fall in values, but we weren't seeing the evidence of that. And when I was going into these listing presentations and the vendors were worried about the market crashing, we had very honest and open conversation. And I convinced many of these people not to sell at that time. It was a risk, and I had to say to them that I'm not here to predict the future. I'm taking a view based on what evidence I'm experiencing. I don't see the market correcting in the short term. It may do down the track, but the evidence of a correction hasn't shown itself to me yet. So if you're selling purely because you're worried about a crash, I don't think you have to make that rush decision. Now, a lot of those people listened to me, and I ended up selling those homes 1.5, 2 years later. And some of those homes I sold for $1 million more than what they were worth 2 years before. And it was a very nice experience because the advice that I gave was contrary to the analysts and the economists and the banks, but it proved to be accurate, and it banked a lot of upside for these owners. And that's, for me, the biggest, I guess, focus if you're getting in this industry is that your job is to maximize price for the vendor. And if you can create more value and wealth for them, then you've done your job very well. And I think those conversations for me were ones that I'll remember for my career. When it comes to property marketing, I think agents need to become savvy with the tools at their disposal. And there's many options that you have in this industry. Our focus, and what I believe is the most effective form of marketing, is predominantly digital. And we subscribe to realestate.com and Domain, and I would be up to suggest that you should take the best packages on both of those platforms. Don't compromise on digital marketing. In my experience, to try and save a few quid, and rather than do a premier property, you do a feature property on realestate.com to save some money, I find that approach to be penny wise, pound foolish, where you save 2 or 3 grand, but you probably lose 20, 30, 50 on the sale price. So digital marketing is a strong focus. Social media marketing is probably the fastest growing platform to reach a targeted audience. We spend, as a team, approximately $600,000 per annum on Facebook, Instagram sponsored ads. We don't do that just to trial it. We do that because we've seen the results of it. And about 20% of our buyer inquiry at the moment comes through social. So for me, a good marketing package starts with good presentation. That's really vital. It's not just about getting it out online. First, let's look at the property that you're selling. Does it present well? Does it need a bit of touch-up painting? If it's a home, do we do a little bit of landscaping, mulch the garden beds, do an external house wash, do a glass clean, get inside, do some touch-up painting internally, externally if need be. How are the carpets? Do we need to clean them or replace them? Do we need to amplify the lights inside? All of these things impact on the outcome. And property is one of the only asset classes that doesn't have a recommended retail price or a fixed value. As an agent, you have the opportunity to influence or manipulate that dependent on how you approach it. The old school approach was do nothing, get it on the market and sell it for as quickly as you can for whatever price the market's willing to pay. And there's some agents that still subscribe to that. But for me, the new agent, the one that's going to have a more successful career path, is really thinking about it from the vendor side of the table. And if it was my home, what would I do with it? I'm not going to present it in a substandard manner. I'm going to do these items that have a return on investment. And not everything has a return. Today's market, you can't do kitchens and bathrooms and renovations and make a profit because the price of construction has gone up so dramatically. But you can do superficial cosmetic upgrades for a fraction of the cost compared to what you get back in return on sale price. So for me, it's really vital to get the presentation right first, and then we want beautiful photography. We want beautiful day photography for the internals. We want some nice dusk photography focusing on the externals. There's a bit of a formula to photos that once you start to see and experience, you'll get a better understanding of what works and what doesn't. But giving a lot of thought to presentation and photos, I find has a direct influence on the saleability and the outcome. So it would start with presentation, photography, then strong digital marketing and social media sponsored ads. They're the main things. We also do property videos, floor plans, and those items for me are really important. The main, element that I want to convey to you guys is make it easy for the buyer to do business with you. Don't put up hurdles. Don't make it difficult for them. Don't do marketing without a price. If it's not an auction, put a price on it, make it clear, give them some reference. Otherwise, you'll find the buyers frustrated. Don't advertise properties without a floor plan. Everyone wants to see the floor plan. Make sure you've got one. Videos, I think, are an important tool. And if you study the stats, video content gets a lot higher engagement than static content. So I think agents need to get a bit savvy on what works and what doesn't, build a formula that suits them and their marketplace. Not everywhere is the same. If you're in a low-end market, you might have a slightly different approach. But in the mid to high end, I think that's the best gameplay that you could adopt. One of the most important elements in listing someone's home is being educated about the market. It's vital to know everything that's traded in that area. As an agent, if you're focusing geographically, which I think is the best style of business in this industry, then the area that you're taking care of, your BDA or farm area, as we call it, I believe that agent should be intimately aware with every single transaction that's occurred in the past 1 or 2 years. And if you're not at that level yet, it's very easy to get there. You need to get on CoreLogic, get on Price Finder, spend an hour or two a day, look at what's traded, and you've got to get to understand the different nuances about property, because it's not just about sale price. There's other elements we've got to take into account. It's about orientation, which way does it face? It's about the frontage of a home. Is it a 10-meter block, 15-meter block, 20-meter block? What are the contours of the land? Because some blocks are really big, but they're not practical. You can only use a small portion of them. So you can't value that the same as a level block. And these are things that whilst, when you're in the industry and you start to experience these things, you'll get a better understanding of them. But pricing is probably one of the most sensitive topics that agents are struggling to meet the seller on and align with the seller on. And it's a dangerous scenario if you don't know what you're talking about. You don't want to sit in a living room and the sellers start to quote sales around them that you're not aware of or privy to. You should know those sales very well, and you should memorize them before you go in. But for me, it's really important at the listing presentation not to be combative, because most sellers, let's be real, they have an optimistic expectation of what their home is worth. Everyone thinks their home is worth more than what it really is. And every buyer naturally thinks that the market is weaker and the house is worth less. And we're the agent in the middle trying to bring them together. But bringing them together is one thing. For me, it's about maximizing price. Your job is to get the buyer up to the seller. It's not to get the seller down to the buyer. It's easy to do that, but that for me is not the game, because anyone can sell real estate that way. The market's there. There doesn't take much skill to get an outcome if you align with market. But a good agent, a skilled agent, can give some comfort and confidence to a buyer and get them to pay more than what the perceived value might be. Now, the living area conversation, the living room conversation is very relevant. When I go into a listing presentation, I take a list of sales, typically 6, 8, or 10 sales, and the way I word those sales is relevant sales. I don't use the word comparable anymore. Why not? Because comparable can be disputed. And when you say comparable, often the owner says, oh, that doesn't compare to mine. Mine's much bigger or has a better view, and that can be contested. But relevant is logical, and you can't really dispute that. It is relevant because it's sold in the same area. So I use relevant sales, and there's probably a lot of other things to discuss here. One would be, let's say a seller wants more than market. This is very natural. Let's say a home is worth 1 million and the seller wants 1.5 million. That might be an extreme example. They're 50% over, but I find that most sellers are at least 10 to 20% over. The dialogue that you use in the living room will dictate and govern the opportunity of you getting or not getting that listing. So how do you have that conversation without being negative? Because if you're a dream killer, you're going to be kicked out, and the other agent that gives them some hope and sunshine is probably going to get the business. It doesn't change the market value. You might have been right and accurate, but it's changed your opportunity. So for me, the language has to be very selective. If the seller's at 1.5 and the market's at 1, there's a $500,000 gap. Rather than me saying to that seller, John, the market's not there, you'll never get that, there's no sales to support it. You've got to sort of swing the conversation around differently. I would say to John, I would love to get you 1.5 million, and if 1.5 million was out there, I would find them for you. I don't have the sales evidence to quote you that, and I'm not the style of agent to give you a figure that doesn't stack up with market. If you want to get to 1.5, there's probably a number of paths. One is we would need to do some renovations. We'd need to do a kitchen update. We'd do the bathrooms. We'd do inside and outside paint. We'd do the floors. We'd do the gardens. We'd add a pool. And I think that would get us closer to what the $1.5 million homes are trading at. So that would align us more with the 1.5 price bracket. Alternatively, John, to get to 1.5, I need you to be patient, and we need the market to grow. We need to see some growth to get this to a $1.5 million figure. And normally the response to that is, well, Alex, I don't want to do anything to the home, and I don't want to wait 5 years for the market to get to 1.5. And that's then the different conversation. I would say, well, let's talk about what's the best we can get now. And as an agent, I can't predict the sale price. No one can. But I can tell you the process to maximize the outcome. I know the process to follow to get to the best outcome. So for me, rather than be combative and say you can't do this and you won't get that, it's here's how you would get that, pave the path. They won't want to walk that path. They'll then turn around and look at the 180, which is the current market, and that's a more relevant and realistic conversation. What sets us apart? I don't know that we're doing anything better than others or more profound. What I strive to do is be the trusted advisor. I want to build a relationship for life. It's not a transactional business. And most of my career, for the first 10 to 12 years, I was a very transactional agent. I was only looking for the next deal. Today, it's very different. I'll give advice selflessly to someone. If I don't think they need to sell, I'll openly say, I don't think you should sell. I think you should hold. That advice, I think, is very well received. When you can be open, transparent, selfless with what you say, because a lot of this advice goes against you financially. We're not saying sell the property, so we're not going to get paid on this, but I'm cool with that, because I think that if you're the trusted advisor, you build a relationship that is hard to break. And when that person is ready, when that time is right, they will come back to you. And you might miss a few here or there, but I think in the long game, you will win multiples if you have that approach. So give accurate advice, be honest with your clients, build trust through advice that's relevant to them. But to have the opportunity to give that advice, you've got to be a source of information. You've got to do your research. You've got to have some knowledge about the economy, about the markets, what's happening with interest rates, what did Philip Lowe say, who's the next governor, what's happening with inflation, what happens with the Chinese economy, with what's happening lately with the banks in the US. I think you've got to have a fairly holistic approach to the financial markets so that your advice is well received. Because if you don't have that knowledge, you're not going to be listened to. When I go to an expert, whether it's a doctor or a profession that's in that field, I want to deal with the best. I want advice that I don't even know. I want them to tell me things that I've never heard before. So to have the privilege to give advice as an agent, first you've got to become intelligent about the markets before you can share it with them. But for me, that approach is something that I've noticed is not as common as it should be in the industry. We are still in an industry that is mostly transactional, and it's all about the next deal. And for me, that's a short-term approach to real estate. If you want to play the long game, be the trusted advisor, and that'll pay back in multiples. Difficult situations are a guarantee in life. You can't avoid them. Doesn't matter what stage you are in your career. And it's not just real estate, it's any industry. You're going to get knockbacks. You're going to get rejection. You're going to get failure. You're going to have transactions that don't go to plan and they crash on building and pest or finance, or there's going to be things that go wrong without doubt. There's no doubt, regardless of where you're at, that you'll experience these things. For me, it's about emotional resilience. How quickly do you recover? It used to take me a long time. If something went wrong and I lost the deal, I would dwell on that and think about it morning and night and wake up at 4 a.m, stressed out for weeks, and it would tax me. And then I would go into victim mentality, which I think is a very bad position to be in, where you start to blame everything on everyone else. Oh, I can't believe this happened to me, and I'm so unlucky. And I like to look at the Stoics. Like when I think about these things, I'm into Stoicism. If you want to read books, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, there's a number of them. There's a guy called Ryan Holiday on Instagram, and you can read some of those messages. I think they've got really beautiful life messages. But for me, I still have challenges in my career. I still get things that I do wrong, mistakes that I make, things that go against what I was hoping for, and it was unexpected and no one's fault. The way I interpret those now is that every shortcoming, every error, every bad experience is an opportunity to learn. And those mistakes that I make, and I still make them today, I look at them and I go, what can I learn from this? How can I make sure it doesn't happen again? And this lesson that I'm learning now may have costed me a little bit today, but if I can take these lessons and move on, it might save me a lot more in the future. So every bad thing that happens in my life, I see it as a lesson, and I think that's a better way of processing challenges than becoming the victim. One of the most exciting things about this industry, in my opinion, is the opportunity that each of us have, and we've all been given equal opportunity. There is no limit to what you could do in this industry. The limits are more self-imposed. They're more sort of your own self-limits that you think about and then sort of set some restrictions on what you could become. The opportunity is there for everyone. It's an industry that you can come into without any education, very little education you would say, without any degrees, without many qualifications. You can come from nowhere. You could be 60 years old, you could be 18 years old. So for me, it's a great opportunity. I don't know any other industry that you can go into without much in background and then become an agent that earns just as much as a surgeon would. I don't know of any other industry that I could have gone into and been in this position. So for me, what excites me about it is the growth that we can experience. I love the industry because of what it's given to me and my family, but I also enjoy the job that I do. I like interactions with my clients. I like dealing with buyers. I like showing homes. I like assessing homes and giving appraisals. I enjoy those things, but it's not all rose and lollipops and rainbows. You've got to be willing to accept that there's going to be some tough times. You're going to psychologically be challenged and you're going to question yourself, because this is not an industry that gives you back instant gratification. You've got to be willing to wait and be persistent and have to accept that you could do a lot of work with no reply and no response or no return for a year to 2 years. And most people give up because they are not used to that. Human instinct is if I put this effort in, then I get the reward back. Real estate is not that direct. Real estate is I put effort in, I put effort in, I put effort in. You might not get a reward. But eventually, if you're persistent and you're consistent, it does come back to you. The question is, are you willing to do the hard tasks? Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to pick up the phone when you don't feel great? Because I find that a lot of people are waiting for their mood to change before they take action. I'm not going to make the call now because I don't feel great, but I'll feel better tomorrow, I'll call them then. No, the feeling comes after the activity. You pick up the phone, as shit as you feel, pardon the English, you pick up the phone, you make the call, and you'll feel better afterwards. I found that in my career, when I've been active and I've been working hard, even though I don't get back anything, I drive home and I feel great because I know I've done the right thing. But when I sit in the office behind the computer screen and I did nothing and I procrastinated and I didn't do the jobs that I should have done, pick up the call, pick up the phone, make the calls, knock on the doors that you need to reach. If I didn't do those tasks, I would drive home with a feeling of guilt. So I think for me, it's very holistic. You could look at it that way, but ultimately it takes some sacrifice, but the opportunity is endless. In this industry, you'll have the opportunity to deal with a very diverse range of people. You'll find that some of your clients or buyers are first home buyers. They've never transacted before. And you might find that for the same property, you'll reach out to an investor that's bought and sold 20 times over the past 30 years. There has to be a slightly different approach to these because the first home buyer will take a little bit more care, a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more educating to get them over the line. There's going to be some fear there. You know, this is a big decision for them. They've never bought a home before. It's the biggest investment they'll make. So I think there's going to be a bit more empathy and consideration there from the agent. And you need to sort of hold their hand and take them through the journey throughout the transaction. An investor that's been doing it for 20 or 30 years doesn't need that level of care and attention. It doesn't mean we neglect them. I think you have to talk a different language to them. You've got to talk their language. And their language might be more based on yield and return and growth and what the market's doing. So we're going to get into more fundamental information about the markets, about returns, about the opportunities than we would with a first home buyer that wants to move into their first home. So it's a slightly different approach. Ultimately, I think you treat people with the same level of respect. This is important because I find that in this industry, we categorize people too much. We give the tenant very little attention and respect. We give a buyer slightly better respect, and we then worship the seller. This is not right. The buyer, the seller, the tenant is the same person at a different stage of their life. Today they're a tenant, tomorrow they're a buyer. Today they're a buyer, tomorrow they're a seller. So it's important that you give them the same level of respect and courtesy, regardless of who they are, because ultimately they're all going to be your seller one day, and you've got to build that relationship. I think the new agent of today needs to be savvy with technology and the tools that are at their disposal. There's an important balance here. I've noticed a lot of AI that's coming into our industry, and AI, I think, will become problematic for some agents that are trying to outsource the direct contact and those relationship building exercises like making those calls. In my view, in a few years' time, AI will be able to make the call for you. They can already do it now. They're doing automatic voicemails. You can do 10,000 of them at once. But I don't think that's going to have the same level of cut through as a direct connection, human to human interaction. So for me, there's an opportunity not to be too lazy and outsource those relationships to artificial intelligence. I think at our industry, if it does evolve and change to become more AI, the agents that are the ones picking up the phones and building those connections will stand out. And for me, that'll never change. I don't think there's ever going to be a better strategy than building trust and rapport with another human being and having a connection. I don't think there's any tool that you're going to use as technology evolves that will outrank that. They'll be supplementing, and you've got to take those on board. I mean, video is important. Social media sponsored ads for us is really vital. And you've got to become savvy at how you target those ads, how you build cookies on those devices and retarget them. There's a lot of conversation around those things. I'm not saying you don't do those. From a marketing point of view, we do those, but we don't want to outsource the relationships to tech. For me, that's a missed opportunity. I've been doing this job for 24 years. My first 10 to 12 years were challenging. I almost gave up in 2011. I was struggling. This is after more than 10 years in this industry. I just thought I wasn't capable, and I had a lack of self-belief and almost gave up. I was actually looking for alternative opportunities to get into another job, and I looked at pharmaceutical rep, sales rep, and fortunately I did not get that opportunity, because if I did, I don't know where I would have ended. I certainly wouldn't have got to where I am now in real estate. So in my future, I'd like to have a bit more work-life balance. I'm very dedicated to my job, but it has taken me a little bit away from my children and my family. So more balance. I want to continue doing this for at least another 5 or 10 years if my health allows it. I've got some issues with my health that I need to manage. But for me, it's if I can continue what we're doing and grow market share in the areas that we focus on, then we'll have some success. It's exciting because I think the opportunity is there for everyone. If you're coming new into this industry, you've got to be very willing to accept that it takes a lot of hard work to be successful. And you've got to be willing to make some sacrifices and face rejection. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And the rejection side of things, I think everyone's a bit scared of. I am, everyone that I've dealt with, no one likes being rejected. But you have to be willing to accept that, because it is a numbers game, and you've got to take the rejection lightly. Don't take it to heart, because it doesn't mean no forever. It's no at that time. Maybe it's a yes down the track. You know, some of my best clients, they rejected me the first few times, and they're clients for life now. And if I had given up on them at the first no, I would never be where I am today. So persistence is really vital. And for me, the opportunity is equal for all. So best wishes.